if you start with a really good product that is differentiated, that's quality, you can actually create the creative that is going to differentiate yourself in market and then amplify that creative because it's going to lead to the sales and the growth and the retention of customers. You're going to build that rabid fan base of brand people that aren't just there because you had a funny ad. They're there because they actually believe in your product and talk about it.
I'm Eric Fulweiler, and this is Scratch, bringing you marketing lessons from the leading brands and brains, rewriting the rulebook from scratch for the world of today. Hey everyone, my guest today is Bryant Garvin, goes by BG. He is the head of marketing at Ozlo. Ozlo is a early stage, science-driven sleep and audio technology company that's developing a suite of sleep solutions to improve wakefulness, quality of mental and physical well-being, et cetera, without pharmaceutical intervention. So their first product is this thing called Sleep Buds that they're going to be launching pretty soon. Kind of like, and you'll hear BG talk about it, but like earphones that you can wear while you're sleeping. Really interesting to think about how they're potentially disrupting a couple different categories there and creating a new behavior for people that don't use anything when they go to sleep right now. So we do talk about Ozlo, and I think it's super interesting what they're doing. They've raised over $1 million in crowdfunding. Already they're emerging from stealth. They're going to start shipping product pretty soon, but also BG has 18 plus years of experience growing brands like Purple, the mattress e-com giant that you probably heard of. He helped to grow that from zero to over $1 billion in valuation in 18 months. And he has, as you hear him say, billions of advertising views to his name. And there's certainly a reason for that. You have to bear with us in the beginning of this conversation. We go on, and it's totally my fault, a bit of a tangent, because he had 2 Stanley Cups on his desk right before we were pressing record. And I was like, man, we got to talk about everything that's going on with Stanley going viral. I didn't even know the new president or whatever at Stanley was the CMO of Crocs, which if you know us, you know, that's one of our favorite challenger brands to talk about. So we get into a pretty interesting conversation about how successful challenger brands are able to tap into and consistently ride the wave of culture. Some of the highlights for me from the actual conversation about BG's experience, we talk about this performance branding. It's not performance or brand. It's both of them together. And we talk about that from BG's own experience as a marketer and his skill set. But also I really like, and he gets very specific with, here are the 3 things that you need to do to drive effective performance with a brand-led approach. We also have a really good conversation about the changing nature of the CMO role and just what kind of skill set and perspective you need as a marketer if you want to kind of climb the ranks in the world of 2024 and beyond. And I'll give you a hint what his advice is going to be. He says, nobody ever got fired for generating more revenue. So I'm going to leave it there. Really good, high energy conversation. He said to me after we stopped recording, like, he's just so passionate about this stuff and you can really feel it in the conversation. So I will leave you to it without further ado. Please enjoy my conversation with BG, head of marketing and growth at Ozlo. All right, BG, before we even get into any of the questions, I wish that we had been recording for the last 5 minutes. So we're just going to go straight into it. Can you please tell us, and for those watching, what you have on your desk right now?
I've got a Stanley. This one has my electrolytes in it.
But not only a Stanley, that's apparently like a limited edition Christmas thing that people resell.
This one's a limited edition Christmas one. Like, I actually use them. I don't buy them and resell them, right? Like, I actually like them, use them, love them.
People are reselling Stanley Cups?
Yeah.
Really?
Dude, okay. I don't know if you saw the whole Starbucks Target fiasco recently.
Oh, no, I didn't.
Okay, so Starbucks had all of this stuff going on, right? And then they came out with a limited edition pink and red Valentine's Day Stanley only in Target Starbucks locations. They sold out in minutes. Like, there was literally lines around the block. Like, and they sold out, and then people were posting them back online same day for like $450, $500, $800. It's crazy.
It's insane. I mean, I'm going to let you introduce yourself in a second, but this is just fascinating because and for folks that are in our AMP community, which by the way, we got to get you added to, this and Crocs. And when I heard that connection, I was like, forget it, shut this conversation down, press the record button. We got to get this on tape. But it's just amazing, these brands that are able to completely hijack culture And like, sure, you talk about case studies of brands that are able to grow and stuff like that, but a freaking like tumbler cup of which there are thousands of different variations. And you got to think the people at Yeti are just kicking themselves for like, I thought that we owned this category as a challenger brand. What the heck is happening here? It's amazing. It really is.
Yeah. And from a brand that's been around since the early 1900s, that for a lot of us whose parents and grandparents worked in construction or doing things like that, they had the old green huge thermoses, right? Like the fact that this brand has been around forever and all of a sudden it's the thing that like kids in elementary school all the way to, moms making drinks at home on TikTok, right, are like passionate about. It's crazy. I love it. But they're done really well. And they fit in most cup holders.
We got to do a rival tumbler.
Dude, that'd be good.
That's the new goal. All right. So let's go back to the beginning. Do you want to pick a different challenger brand that you're particularly passionate about, or do you want to just go with Stanley?
Honestly, I love Stanley just because of how it's come into the limelight, right? This Stell brand that basically made thermoses to take your hot coffee in the morning or your lunch or whatever, all of a sudden now is mainstream, TikTok viral, Instagram reel viral, YouTube, right? Like it's crazy. They come out with limited editions and they sell out in minutes online. Like it's a freaking tumbler. And what I love about it is they've freaking done the fashion type of thing with tumblers. Like, hey, here's this limited edition, push it out, boom, it's sold, right? Like I have 10 in my cupboard downstairs because I like the different colors.
And so I didn't realize this, and I mentioned it before, but I'm just looking at it now. So the CMO from Crocs, Terrence Riley, who, let's think about the timeline. Yeah, so he would have been behind a lot of kind of the resurgence and growth. And I mean, talk about a brand that not only was popular once and then was popular again, but was popular once, was unbelievably uncool. And if you ask some of the people in our AMP community, it still is, but is becoming culturally relevant again. So he's now, if he's able to sustain it with Stanley, and this is one of the things that we're looking at with our share of search tool. I can't remember, but we were using our share of search tool to kind of analyze the tumbler travel mug category, because obviously a ton of search and activity around Stanley with the activation that they did, but are they going to be able to sustain it? Because from my perspective, what Terrence and the team at Crocs have done really well is they've consistently placed themselves in and around the individuals, the brands. Actually just got a text from our NASCAR client right before walking on here that they just did a collab with Crocs as well. But the consistency of being able to, I'm sure they took a lot of swings and misses that we don't see, but hit these, some of them are home runs, but a lot of them are just like single after single of being able to immerse themselves within modern culture. It's really amazing. And for somebody to potentially do that twice.
Yeah, that's the really cool part, is to take a brand that, like you said, Crocs, that was completely like, they were the epitome of old people, nurses. That's all that wore those things because they were comfy, to now my kids ask for them. And they not only ask for them, but then they're forcing me to shop online for the little things that you can plug into them now and like decorate them and do all that stuff.
The charms, yeah.
Yeah, the charms. Yep. And a lot of it's just because from what I've learned, and because I've studied this a little bit, because I'm fascinated obviously with the brand in general, but there was an NBA player, if I remember correctly, that was wearing them around and posted just a normal picture, and they saw the Crocs on him. And so they reached out, and that's kind of what started the whole thing. And then with Stanley, what really happened is they came out with these tumblers. And I mean, they obviously have the Stanley brand. Like they've been making vacuum sealed things for over 100 years, right? So like they know how to do it. But what happened is there was this lady whose car caught on fire the next day. So they've got pictures and videos of the car and all this stuff. And afterwards, after it's all cooled down, she's going to the car to try and see if there's anything left in it. She goes in and pulls out her Stanley, and it still had ice in it. And she posted it, and they leveraged that. They ended up buying her a car. Like they just capitalized on something that happened that kind of went viral already and leveraged it into things. So it started selling out, people started doing it. Moms all over the place. Like, it's really big in Utah for some reason. I have no idea why, but like everybody in Utah has a Stanley, and then it started like flowing out everywhere. And then they're in retailers, right? Like all of that type of stuff. They've done a really good job with merchandising too, like special editions. Yeah, it's kind of crazy cool.
We got to do a breakdown or try to get someone from there on the show because, you see these brands that kind of go viral. They're able to, for whatever reason, the perfect combination of being in the right moment, the right time, being able to move quickly, do something clever, and they kind of blow up for a second. But certainly Crocs and even Stanley, sure, they had their blow up moment with that viral video or campaign, whatever you want to call it. But this has been a very strategic and consistent evolution and push towards becoming culturally relevant and therefore growing the business, which I think is super smart.
And I think one of the big things that a lot of people miss with them is they strategically actually allow them to go out of stock. Like, they do drops almost, like, which is what you expect from fashion brands. And so everything's out of stock. They sign up for text alerts, sign up for email alerts, and then something drops and it's like, boom, right? Like they've done collabs with like Grammy award winning, country winning artists, like all of these different things. And it's just really kind of cool where they've turned a tumbler essentially into a fashion accessory.
Yeah. I mean, even for us, I'm sitting here wearing our 5th edition Rival hoodie that just came out. But anyway, we really look to particularly challenger fashion brands as kind of aspiration because oftentimes they are at the forefront of creating culture, what's cool, what's relevant. And so I think that that's certainly a takeaway from me. And one of the things that we do, granted on a very small scale, but it's like, hey, there are certain types of consultancies that we want to be or not be like, but actually is there an aspirational brand outside of our category? And fashion is a good one because of the cultural relevance element of it that we can kind of think about and try to act and behave like. I definitely want to come back to this in terms of what you're doing with Ozlo. Well, why don't we 9 minutes in, actually get to talking about you and your business, although this has been fascinating. I love it. So, BG, can you give us an overview of what Ozlo does for those who don't know?
Absolutely. So Ozlo is essentially a sleep company. We're here to introduce non-pharmaceutical sleep aids to help people fall asleep easier and stay asleep longer. And our initial product is the Ozlo Sleep Buds. So for those on video, you can see them here. They basically are a really small in-ear headphone, if you wanted to call it, earbud, although one of our taglines is not earbuds, sleep buds, right? Because we own that trademark sleep buds phrase, right? And so trying to head into that, and they fit comfortably in your ear so that you can lay on your side, you can sleep with it, you can stream whatever you want, fall asleep. So whether you fall asleep listening to that murder podcast, or maybe, I don't want to say it, Eric, but maybe people fall asleep listening to you.
I could see it putting a lot of people to sleep, yeah.
And then it'll automatically sense that you're sleeping and transition to a masking sound, like a white noise, a babbling brook, something like that, to help block out the noise that might disrupt you. So if you've got a snoring partner, noisy neighbors, you live in the city, you're traveling at work in hotels. Like, I don't know about you, I was just at a hotel this last week in Utah, and for some odd reason, I could hear every door opening and closing like it was my own. It's like like, hello? Oh, wait, that's not, but like being able to fall asleep and not have any of that disturb you is kind of cool. So that's what we are.
And what stage are you at? I know we're going to talk about crowdfunding, but is the product in market, customers, like where are you at as a business?
We have been pre-selling since August through Kickstarter and now Indiegogo. We're up to almost 13,000 pre-orders, customers, over 14,000 units that we've sold so far in the US, Canada, Europe, UK, and Australia. And we literally just moved to production last week and are waiting on a few certifications and stuff. This is something I didn't know, having actually worked in electronics like this. You have to have a physical certificate in your hands in order to actually ship product to consumers. So we've passed all the tests, but we're waiting for an actual physical certificate in order to actually ship it to consumers. And so we'll latest going to start shipping end of February and try and get through all of these pre-orders and, ramping production, all of that stuff. That's part of the fun part of what I love doing is like understanding the merging of marketing, operations, all of those things and how they all play together. And so we're almost there, almost ready to launch our e-com site, which hopefully beginning of April, assuming we don't sell through another 10,000 units in the next 2 months. But yeah, exciting. It's almost there.
Cool. So I think the place I want to start is in our prep call. We always ask, what are you more passionate about than 99% of other CMOs out there? And the kind of immediate answer that you had was this idea of brand versus performance, which of course every marketer has had to live through and probably wade into at one point or another in their career. But what you said was, quote, if you're handling them separately, you're doing it wrong. So why don't we start out there? We love a strong opinion, strongly held. What does that mean to you? What are people getting wrong and what are people getting it right and how are they doing it?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've kind of coined this phrase performance branding. Like if you're doing your marketing right, you're not only going to be driving sales, but you're also going to be building a brand along the way. And when I think about a brand for me, right, like I didn't go to, an MBA, CMO school, any of that stuff. Like I'm somebody that grew up in the trenches, right? I did direct mail way back in the day. My first digital job was an account executive at Lycos as it was dying way back then, right? And I've come through the trenches. I was at Purple. I was the OG director of marketing at Purple. I was the CMO at Groove Life, another brand I grew from beginning to almost 100 million in sales. And then I'm here at Ozlo. And for me, a brand is a personality. It's a community. It's a feeling. It's not just a logo or a color design or any of those types of things. All of those things play into it, but it's what does that brand feel like, right? Is it somebody that you'd want to invite over for dinner and to hang out and watch the Super Bowl party? Or is it somebody you wave at and pass and like, hi, and like awkwardly, right? And so if you're doing your marketing correctly, you can build that brand at the same time you're driving performance. And that's one of the beautiful things from Purple to Groove Life to now Ozlo is that video first type of mentality where we leverage humor, comedic stuff that actually grabs people's attention in a way you would never expect and gets them to sit around and watch essentially an infomercial selling your product and they actually like it, right? Like that's the cool part about being able to sell things. So Purple, for those that don't know, was actually bootstrapped. We didn't have funding. First year we grew to $67 million in sales. Next year was 196 million. Third year was 330 million when we went public. And all of that was 100% bootstrapped. And it's this formula that me, the creative director, the people that I've worked with have been able to repeat time and time again.
And just to be clear and kind of draw it out, because I mean, that's, Purple at one point was, I know, a unicorn, billion dollar valuation. That like, just kind of spell it out for us. What was that formula or what is that formula that other people can potentially take and apply?
The big thing I think is everybody tries to do, like lots of people are like, let's do video, right? The viral stuff is great, but it's hard to just capture that lightning in a bottle and run with it. If you can, awesome, amazing, right? Like having a car start on fire and still having ice in it, Stanley, amazing opportunity. That's not something that happens regularly, right? Whereas we wanted to be able to do that originally. And so the original video that we did at Purple was originally produced by the Harmon brothers, the same guys that did Squatty Potty, Poopery, some of those others like that, where they had this comedic intentionality. There was a formula to how they did things. And like one of the big things as a simple thing for anybody that's wanting to do something similar, we look at creative very much like you would test a still image on Facebook, right? And you're like, how do you do that with video? Well, we actually plan out multiple introductions for every single video that we do. We record them all, and then we actually test which intros are the best performing, and then go from there and then run those intros because the rest of the pieces of the video like kind of all play together. and they tell the story. But also with that, each of those little pieces of the video can be pulled out so that it's a standalone section almost. And you can run those things. It's modular in the video sense. And so we learned how to do that at Purple. We reverse engineered all that and started doing that internally, built out the team. I took it to Groove Life, did the same exact thing there. Grew them from 3 to almost $100 million in sales in 4 years. And they're selling silicone rings, right? And then watch bands and now the Groove Belt. But like being able to do that. And then for Ozlo, the same exact thing, right? We open up and there's somebody just sitting, alarm goes off. You see somebody there, he hits over and it's a trash can sitting up in bed. Like that grabs your attention. Right. And it's that not shock value, but that interruption. We are all beings driven by our subconscious, whether we want to believe it or not. So when something is different, it causes you just to pause for a second. And all you need is that pause for just a second because their mouse is already moving to the skip button on an ad on YouTube as an example, right? You just need to get them to pause for just a second to hopefully hook them in and then watch. Right. And so our videos on YouTube, as an example, have 104-second watch time from ads on average per impression. Like that's crazy. People are choosing to watch this long of an ad.
And that goes back to one of the kind of first principles for me is like people will watch advertising if it's good. People don't really care if it comes from a brand or it comes from a person or it comes from a media company. They just care if it's good content, whatever that means to them. If it's informative, if it's educational, whatever, emotional, they just want good content. And really the best ads, from the Super Bowl stuff that everybody talks about to the stuff that wins the quote unquote awards. Well, I shouldn't say quote unquote. I guess what I mean by that is like typically it's judged by kind of like the creatives and not real consumers. But anyway, you know what I mean? Like it's good content. It just happens to come from brands. So in that, like that was obviously a very hot space, still is, the kind of challenger mattress companies. Purple was obviously the big one. I think kind of ended up being the winner there. Casper was kind of off to the races in the beginning and then ran into a lot of issues. From being in that race, being in that category that was being completely disrupted at hyper speed, you know, these were the different days of VC funding, let's say, although I know you said it was bootstrapped, but different approach. What was Casper doing differently that didn't work as well?
I think they went all in on brand. And when I say brand, think traditional brand. Like they raised $250,000. By the time we both went public about the same time, Casper had raised almost $250 million. And in order to fund their growth, we did it all bootstrapped, almost the same exact revenues, and all of that's public, right? Because they're all like publicly traded companies now. So you can see all those numbers out there. And what they did was wrapping subway cars, doing big sponsorships at South by Southwest, different things like that, which grab attention and do those things like that. But they're very traditional, I'm using air quotes, they're traditional type of branding opportunities that are really trying to drive that there. Whereas ours built the brand through the stories we told that also drove performance, because we didn't have $250 million sitting in the bank. We had to drive performance. And in doing so, we created conversations. We created opportunities where people were like, I loved watching this ad. This is the only YouTube ad. And I get that today still. This is the only YouTube ad that had come back and searched for it, because on YouTube, right, you can't share the ad. You can't comment on the ad. You can't like it, any of that stuff. It's missing the social component that is good with TikTok and other platforms like that, which YouTube, you should just introduce that. So they actually have to go back and search afterwards and do that, right? And that's the big difference when I say, like, most people are really performance. I'm going to do a bunch of Facebook, click to conversion, all of this type of stuff, or it's branding. And why do you have to do them so separately? Like, if you're doing it right, they build together and they grow, if that makes sense. And not to knock Purple, but like, you can see how their marketing's changed since they went public, since they became a brand. It's become boring. And it's kind of reflected in their numbers.
Yeah. And I think there is, you know, obviously there are success studies with brands that have kind of, this maybe the right way to say it, but kind of like bought their way to the top, right? Like if you have enough money and you're willing to outspend everybody and you just want to go for like pure saturation, think of like the Geico type of, like you can do that, but it's expensive and you better make sure you win. Because if you end up second or end up not executing on that effectively, and in a way, and we hear this all the time from talking to challenger brands, oftentimes the lack of budget leads them to do more creative things. Thinking about the ideas that they put into market, thinking about the channels where they show up in, et cetera. And really the ideal is that you have the scale of funding or being a $1 billion company or whatever it actually is, but also still kind of the mindset of what I'm getting from you, which is like you're thinking like a challenger. You're not just spending money because you have the money to spend. You're thinking about the most effective and efficient way to drive growth, regardless of the stage that you're at. So to me, just to kind of sum it up for myself and also people listening, what I'm getting from this chapter of this performance branding is so there's a very kind of specific and intentional point from you of like video. The world of 2024, how people are spending time, but also the most effective way to communicate rationally, but more importantly, emotionally and connect with people is video. So you focus on that. And you start with brand in the sense that you appreciate and elevate the value of good creative. You mentioned the guys that came in to do the ads for you at Purple, the kind of really creative thing that you've done, and we'll link to that in the show notes. For Ozlo already, you really value in the way that, to what you said, just a super quant numbers only performance company never would. Start there, but then you're plugging the performance mindset and model into the back end. So you're taking the brand-led creative, but treating it with a very analytical approach to test, to figure out the most effective and efficient placements, and then you kind of scale from there. Is there anything I'm missing? What else would go into kind of the condensed crib notes version of your case study on that?
I think that's accurate. Like it's the emotion, like that is the big thing. I don't know about you guys, but I've never gotten emotional over a search ad, right? Like, and you're competing, hyper competing. Like, for example, in the space I'm in right now, in sleep headphones or others, whatever you want to call it, right? A very niche market. You can pay $2, $3, $4, $5 per click if you're going after non-brand or even more. In the mattress space, some of the clicks were $80 a click in that space. And I'm like, well, I can pay for one click to get to a website, hopefully, right? And they might do something. But if we're trying to build a business profitably, I've got to convert 1 out of every 3 or 4 people, 25% conversion rate off of that, or for that same $80 at 2, 3, 4, 5 cents per 30-second view on YouTube that they've chose to do, and I connect with them emotionally, I can reach tens of thousands of people. And then on the back end, and this is the big thing is, while I grew up in performance marketing, the directly track conversion stuff, all of those things, this allowed me to actually understand the true macro level old school advertising, right? Like when we think Mad Men days, they didn't have anything to track. They basically had cells and how much money they were putting out. And what did that do in markets and other things like that? And for this, like to this day, I started it at Purple. Every business I've been at, it starts off a Google Excel spreadsheet, right? I'm putting in my numbers every day for every single platform, how much money we're putting out, how much money is coming in, what is that macro level thing? And I see the numbers daily and I start to understand the trends, but I'm also looking at it on a weekly and a monthly basis so that I've got a specific target for my MER, marketing efficiency ratio, or what I, on the inverse, an AIR, an advertisement investment ratio, where it's like ad spend divided by revenue and it's a percentage. So I know what I need to hit on that basis. And I'm not looking at, oh my gosh, the ads went horrible today or revenue was off today. I'm looking at that longer lens, especially if you're trying to leverage YouTube or any of those other platforms that are not conversion platforms. When you go to YouTube, Eric, why do you go there?
Search for information, typically.
Okay, you went there to do something specific, right? So if an ad interrupts you, if it's really interesting, you might stay and watch it. But are you likely to click out, go to that website and stop doing why you went to YouTube?
Only by accident.
Okay. But you don't finish the conversion. Usually it's like a click accidental, go back to YouTube.
Yeah. It's one of those things, especially with mobile display ads. I'm like, I have clicked on mobile display ads so many more times by accident because my thumb's too fat or whatever than on purpose. But some media agency is like high-fiving themselves.
Exactly.
Wherever.
But why do you go to Facebook or TikTok or Instagram or something like that?
Yeah, I mean, that's probably more the entertainment part of it being social connection, sometimes information searching.
Like we're back into having Starbucks lines and stuff like that, right? So like you open it up, you've got 5 minutes, you're wasting time. Do you know what to expect on there? No, it's a freaking slot machine, right? Like who knows what's going to pop up. But if you go there to waste time, and so if something entertaining pops up or something that you're interested in is an ad, you're more likely to engage with that because that's why you went there, was to find something to engage with. And those are the differences between the platforms. And so if you're looking at YouTube the same way you would Instagram Reels or TikTok or Facebook or any of these other things, you're looking at it wrong. And that's also the right and wrong of things, right? Is how does that play in? Because YouTube is going to, if you see something you really like, you're not going to purchase it right then. You're going to finish doing what you did on YouTube. But then what are you going to do? If you really liked that product or brand, you're going to go search for it.
Hey everyone, just wanted to take a quick break because we've actually heard from many of you that you want to get a better understanding of what it is that we actually do as a business. You know us through this podcast, all the content that we put out, the events that we put on, the community that we have, the media company side of what we're up to here at Rival. But actually the core business, just to kind of fill you all in, is we're a full service marketing agency at this point. Obviously, we specialize in challenger brands. And what that means is that we work with either startups to help them scale and get to the next level, or we work with a lot of incumbents like Reebok, Unilever, JP Morgan to help them innovate or launch something new within the marketing function. We typically work across 4 main areas of the marketing department: brand and product positioning, creative ideation and production, paid media planning and buying, and customer data and marketing technology. We're also building some tech of our own, as you would have seen with Curo and also Enodo. So that's it. Just wanted to fill you all in since you've asked for it. And if you're interested in hearing more about what we're up to, please get in touch. But with that, I'll let you get back to the show. I don't know how to frame up this question, but if you had to define yourself as a marketer, you have 100% between performance and brand. My inclination, we had our prep call, or we've been talking for a little while now, is that you are 70-30 performance brand. I know it's both, they go together. Like I totally get it, but like just humor me for a second. Is that accurate? And then I think the more important question is, what do you think the ideal split is for a modern marketer in the world of 2024? Or even you could stretch that to 2030 for people who are coming up the ranks right now and want to be CMO. Because I guess what I'm thinking is like, yes, it's both, but if you're coming up in more of like a generalist brand role, do you really need to make sure that you're going to get the foundation of performance? Because in a way, you could argue that's more important, even though it's both combined. So I know I threw a lot in there, but how would you define your breakdown, and what do you think the ideal is and why?
I think it'd probably be 70-30, 60-40, leaning towards performance. And for me, I used to be all performance, right? I started in the search space and it was click to conversion, right? But the world has changed. Not just since iOS 13, right? Like not just that, but like the platforms that exist, how consumers can consume content, not just advertising, how they engage. Mobile, when I started, was non-existent, right? Like I had a Palm Trio and I was way ahead of the line, right? I could like go on the web back in 2006 and 7. But like mobile has completely changed everything. Like I still run into websites that are big brands that I'm going to put a number in and I get a QWERTY keyboard. Do you think I really want to sit there and try and, with my little finger or big fingers on this little tiny thing, try and type in my credit card number? No. And so they miss the performance part there. Right. And it's so easy. It's just a quick little change on the back end to how you label the field. And so like that performance piece of stuff is really important. Like if you keep putting out dollars and people are talking about you, let's actually use something really recent. What's the big thing that kind of blew up around Snoop Dogg recently?
The Solo?
The solo stove.
And the CMO got fired, didn't he?
Tons of conversation. It was the CEO that even got fired, not just the CMO. The CEO, well, it was a mutually agreed upon decision, is what they said, right?
Sure. Spend more time with the family.
Yeah. Exactly. But it started a ton of conversation from a brand standpoint. Crushed. Like everybody I know was like, what do you mean he's going smokeless? Like, what does that mean? Like all the news, it was everywhere. Everybody was talking about it. They literally had zero lift in sales. So at the end of the day, the conversation was amazing. It may pay off 6 months, a year, 2 years down the road. But when they needed to have a lift today, it didn't pay off. And so at the end of the day, why did that CEO, CMO, whoever get fired? It wasn't because it didn't do great branding for them. It's because it didn't perform. Nobody gets fired because they've got a bunch of buzz around them. Or nobody gets fired because they're doing really good revenue wise and their numbers are growing and all of those things. And as a marketer, I think it's really important that you understand that side of the business. And for me, it's not just, hey, these numbers did this. How does that impact the overall business? For me, I think it's really important that you understand how your piece of the puzzle fits into the overall thing. If you're starting off, talk to your uppers, like have conversations with them, like, hey, how does what I'm doing impact the overall business? I can guarantee you there's not another single person anywhere at your level or even above you that is asking that question because they're only concerned about what they are doing and the numbers that they are showing. If you can start asking the questions of how does this influence this, you're going to start progressing.
Yeah. We're actually doing an insight show soon. Just need to find the time to write the brief and figure out who we bring onto it, but about the changing nature of the CMO role. Because of course there's the whole discourse of shortest tenure within the C-suite, oftentimes reports to a CRO or a CCO, doesn't usually sit on the board, all that stuff. And I think a big part of that is that, much of the marketing industry does not view themselves as kind of like a commercial function. And much of the industry, having spent a lot of time in advertising agencies, and this is the reason that I felt like I never fit in, because much like you, I didn't study marketing at school, I didn't get an MBA. There were conversations about marketing for the sake of marketing, doing a really cool campaign, even to the point where I know some agencies will always include one idea in a creative presentation that has a beach in it so that if the client chooses that, they get to go somewhere fun. That's an extreme example, but I guess my point is, like, as marketers, I think we need to put ourselves on the same level as CRO, as CFO, as CEO, and thinking about how I define it, which is marketing is how you tell a story to change perception and behavior to drive the growth of your business. It is a means to an end. We can get all excited, South of France and Cannes every year, the awards that we want to give each other, climbing the ladder. I did that campaign, put the solo stove Snoop Dogg thing on your CV. At the end of the day, we're here to drive growth of the business. And I don't know, and again, as someone who doesn't come from, I guess now it's been 15 years, so I can't say that, but doesn't come from like the traditional, maybe old school world of marketing, I don't know why it wouldn't be anything other than that. And I know I'm just kind of like ranting here, but I really like what you're saying. And I think we see this a lot more with people that are in earlier stage, especially bootstrap business. It's like you would never consider doing a campaign just because you thought it was cool, and certainly not just because your expensive agency thought it was cool. So anyway, I'll get down off my soapbox, but
we might need to have another call just to rant about this stuff because there's a ton of things I can talk to about it. But anyways.
But let me ask you one more question on that. I know we're spending a lot of time on this, but I think this is fascinating. When it comes to creative, so you mentioned that you found, a really good partner when you were at Purple. What advice do you have on choosing a creative partner, particularly for people who are in businesses where there's not a budget to go get like a big agency, or maybe you wouldn't even recommend that even if you do? How should people think about getting the right creative partner on board if they don't have that internally or they aren't that themselves?
First off, I think the big thing is getting somebody that understands that you're trying to drive growth. Like creatives that just want to make pretty things are great. We need them. But you want a creative that understands you can make something pretty but it's even more important to make something functional. And they're okay with losing a little bit of that creative beauty in order to drive that function. Somebody that actually has somebody on their team that thinks a little bit more analytically, maybe. Somebody that's willing to actually workshop with you through things, make sure that, like, if they're writing a script for a video, that you're actually going back and forth so that you can make sure that the important pieces are in there that actually drive the sales, right? Storytelling is great, but if they're telling a story and that's all it is it actually going to get people to purchase your product? And so I think even on the creative side, being able to have people that understand the performance side of things, that's going to continue to shift as well. And it's completely necessary. There's always going to be the big brands that want the Super Bowl commercials, but even with the Super Bowl commercials, they drive performance, right? The only reason a Super Bowl commercial, and this is something I will stand behind almost forever, is if you see a brand video that is viral with hundreds of millions of views, like I have billions of views on YouTube videos that I've ran. Okay. The only reason I ran those I could have that much in videos or in video views is because I put money behind it. The only reason a Super Bowl ad goes viral is not because that creative's great, but if they didn't pay $4 million for that spot, pay for the YouTube advertising, do all of that stuff, that video would have never seen the light of day if they just posted it to their YouTube channel. So brand videos that go viral 99% of the time are because they've put money behind them. And as a startup, the only way you can keep putting money is if you're making money.
We're not going to get through everything, but I think I knew that within the first 30 seconds of this conversation. All good. I think the thing that I do want to draw out from our brief here is we've talked a lot about, let's say, the content, creative, performance branding side. I know a big thing for you, and you shared with us before, kind of your 3 pillars of marketing. We've touched a little bit on the amplification, but actually the first one for you is product. So can you talk about why it's so important to start with the product in order to build a successful brand? And what does that mean in practice for you over your career or right now at Ozlo?
Yes, absolutely. So for me, whenever I look at joining a company and growing something, it starts with the product, right? You've got 3 pillars: product, amplification, or creative, and amplification. Those are the 3 pillars of real growth. You can have 2 and do really well, but having all 3 is how you build a sustainable business. And if the product is amazing and it gets out in the market and people are going to start talking about it, right? Their friends are going to talk about it. The reviews are going to be amazing. Amazon reviews, all of these different things. You're not going to have the returns that you would normally have. So it allows the business to start flywheeling. And if it's a really unique, differentiated product, it gives you something to truly talk about, not just fluffy branding, right? And so that's part of the big piece, that as you do it, if you start with a really good product that is differentiated, that's quality, you can actually create the creative that is going to differentiate yourself in market, and then amplify that creative because it's going to lead to the sales and the growth and the retention of customers. You're going to build that rabid fan base of brand people that aren't just there because you had a funny ad. They're there because they actually believe in your product and talk about it. And that makes sense.
Well, I guess it's too early stage, but how do you think about kind of like early customer advocacy? Like, are you doing specific things, whether you're at Purple or now with Ozlo, to try to kind of cultivate and grow that?
Yeah. So one of the reasons we actually started on Kickstarter and have moved to Indiegogo is not just because of crowdfunding, because it's not that we needed the funding, we're venture backed, but because it starts to build that community. We have people that are early adopters that are going through it. Some of them, because there have been delays, aren't quite happy, but there are a lot of them that are actually really enjoying the fact that we are sharing this story. You allow them to come along with you, and so they almost feel like they are a part of it, right? And if the product is amazing, they're like, hey, I was a Kickstarter backer, right? When this goes viral and everybody's talking about Ozlo because of what we're doing, they feel like they were one of the very first. They were the very first Stanley buyers, the first, you know what I mean? And that's kind of cool. And we're able to get feedback from them as well because they know we're early. So we're able to build this product in a way that gets feedback from consumers, allows us to iterate and grow on it, but it also turns them into advocates.
Totally. Yeah. Have you heard it's an old kind of VC, or I guess it would be entrepreneur who's pitching VC quote, if you ask for a check, you'll get feedback. If you ask for feedback, you'll get a check. And I think that's so true because ultimately, not to go too deep down kind of like the psychology rabbit hole here, but Maslow's hierarchy of needs, all that stuff, it's all self-actualization. Like people want to feel important. People want to feel like they matter, right? And I think that's really interesting. And I'm going to probably digest this and come up with a better way of like synthesizing it for me. Cause like, this is the thing that's so insane for me. I know I've said this before and I apologize to everybody listening, but bear with me. It's like, this is my job. I get to just sit here and kind of have a master class on marketing from someone who built Purple and this other brand, what you're doing with Ozlo. Like it's really amazing. And I get to kind of sit with this and digest it and percolate it. And I guess for people listening, you get that as well. But I feel like it's pretty lucky. I feel pretty lucky because it's part of my job. But I think what I'm getting out of that I'm certainly going to take away and think about is if you can find a way to make people feel like they're a part of what you're doing, even in a super, super small way, right? Because if people are donating $100 on Kickstarter, they're not meaningful shareholders, but it's more than none. It's something. They feel like they are part of what you're doing, not just a customer. So I think that's a really interesting prompt that I'm definitely going to think about for Rival and also our clients. And I think people listening should as well.
Absolutely. 100%. And then obviously social engagement's really big, like doing moderation, commenting, actually having conversations on social, which we're a really small team. So we're just getting to that stage of being able to do that. But that is one of the big things that I think really helped on the Purple side of stuff and the Groove Life side of stuff is we actually engaged in those conversations early on with consumers, right? Like one of my favorite things, I know we're almost up on time here, is at Purple, somebody said something like just ridiculous as a comment on an ad. And there was a part in the Purple video where she was like, "You're dumb for thinking that." And I had my team create a GIF of her doing that. And I posted it as a reply because it was just something ludicrous that he said, but that was part of the personality. That was part of the brand we wanted to have. Right. And so if you went to that post on Facebook, it was literally the number one comment was my reply because it had been like liked and loved and commented on like 1,000 times. And that builds community.
Totally going to run out of time. I do want to ask you though, because it's something that we hear from a lot of people and I'd just be curious. Do you feel like post iOS 14, transitioning to cookieless, all that stuff, from an e-commerce perspective, is it significantly different or the principles and everything that we've talked about are still the most effective way to build a brand and drive revenue in the world of 2024?
I think what it is starting to force people to do is look at marketing fundamentals, not just like letting a thing track your conversions and, oh, I'm amazing. It's actually like, what is actually happening? What's the psychology behind this? Why is somebody choosing to do this? I can't track all of this, but our sales are still growing. What's driving that? And you have to start looking at those things. And that's one of the reasons why I look at a macro level of dollars out versus dollars in, because if that's continuing to scale and grow, if I add a new platform, right, tested at a certain level, and then I don't know if it's tracking necessarily correctly, right? Facebook sure as heck isn't, TikTok doesn't, any of these things. But if I add a new platform, let's say 10% of my spend or investment, and I don't like to look at marketing as spend, I look at it as an investment because if you're doing it right, it's coming back, right? Like I talk about marketing investment. So if you introduce 10%, like 80% should be your bread and butter, always running, or 70% like the stuff works. 20% should be well, I'm not 100% sure. And then 10% should just be out there. But if you do that and you see a lift, but it's not tracked, did it work? Right? If you cut down a tree in the forest, does anybody hear it? I don't know, but the tree's cut down. Did the money come? And that's the thing that you've got to get out of is, did I track it? Who cares? At the end of the day, did you grow the business? Is there more money coming in than going out? If you can do that and show that, your job is secure.
All right. We ran out of time. I did want to, we might have to do a part 2. Let's do it this way. People listening, if you want me to go bug BG to come back to do a second episode or a shorter second episode on category creation, because I think given Purple and definitely what's going on with Ozlo, let me know. If we get enough people that reach out, BG, I might hit you up to do a part 2. But why don't we finish with a couple quick lightning round, 1 to 2 sentence answers questions. Can you tell us what's the best piece of career advice you've ever received?
Be passionate about what you do.
What is your current or all-time marketing pet peeve?
That if there's a call to action, it's not branding.
Ooh, deep. I think I'm going to wake up in the middle of the night thinking about that one. What, do you have a marketing tool or resource, something very specific like a book, podcast, website that you cannot live without?
I really like Influence, the book. Because getting into the psychology, the understanding human behavior, that is the piece that so many people miss because they're looking at clicks, impressions, conversions, and missing the why. Figuring out the why is actually the most important thing because it allows you to repeat the process.
Last question. What is one thing people should do differently after listening to this episode?
Stop only caring about the numbers in the dashboard.
Love it. That is a perfect place to leave it. BG, thank you so much. Right up on time. Took the full hour with you, but I really appreciate it. We'll link to everything. Super excited to see you all start shipping product, and we'll be keeping an eye on things. Scratch is a production of Rival. We are a marketing innovation consultancy that helps businesses develop strategies and capabilities to grow faster. If you want to learn more about us, check out wearerival.com. If you want to connect with me, email me at eric@wearerival.com or find me on LinkedIn. If you enjoyed today's show, please subscribe, share with anyone you think might enjoy it, and please do leave us a review. Thanks for listening, and see you next week.